I have a joke. It's my favorite joke. If you don't corny. What has a bottom on the top? Does somebody know it? Why y'all laughing if y'all know? Somebody know? What has a bottom on the top? A leg.
So people are out together just now. We're like collecting O's at different times.
How to go through at the end of the class. At the end. Okay, no, I don't want to share.
All right, I'll follow you. Juliana Zamora. I should know that. I have remembered everything.
Okay.
Juliana. Juliana, what do you think this tumor represents?
So it's something on the heart.
Yes, it is. Good job.
Does it have to do with the amount of fat that's on?
It's fatty. So it's a white, elevated mass. So it'll be a differential.
Like an abscess, maybe?
That's a very good differential. Because abscesses are large, they're usually white to yellow because they're full of pus. So I love the differential. And while I have you, can you share any, would you like to share anything about that?
Sure.
Yes.
So all of you know that. So something I guess they don't know. I'm older. So I was a substitute teacher for a long time before coming.
What grade?
I did K through 12. It just depended on the school.
And what do you teach?
Anything pretty much, aside from like PE and stuff like that. I did most of like the
So any subject matter.
Yeah.
How did you like it?
I liked it. I would have to say that like my favorite were elementary and then high school. I really wasn't a fan of middle school. Yeah. But it was good. I liked it.
Anybody got teenage kids? I got one. Middle school was the hardest. Oh my God. But now, and he's a senior, and he's, we're doing better. But I don't know. So like, I have so much respect for teachers that teach our youth because it is not easy. Like just being a parent to one of them is difficult. So just imagine. So, oh, wonderful. Kudos to you. Okay. So abscess is a differential. Anybody else want to give another one?
No idea. I know it has, but I know she's 30 something.
Miss Sheridan, what you
Like,
like?
I do recall you talking to us, and there was one that occurs at the base of the heart.
What was that called?
It wasn't the hemangiosarcoma.
It was the chemodectoma or aortic body tumor.
Yes.
And that would be more up here. So this is actually, so let's see if we can actually tell where we are. So we have one auricle here, and the other auricle, I'm assuming this may be the tip, but you see this coronary groove here where the vessel is? It's kind of going down. And then you have this ventricle coming down here. Oh, you know what? I have a heart in my office. And I'll show it next time. So this is the left ventricle over here. And so your left ventricle kind of goes down and your right ventricle almost sits on top of it. So this is your right ventricle. So this is actually the ventricular wall. Okay? So not so much where that would be, but that's a great differential. And it will look very much like this, but it would be at the base of the heart, like sitting on top of it. So what tumor has a white appearance? So we already know lipoma does, right? And what else? And it starts with an L.
Lymphoma.
Lymphoma. Yep. So this is a lymphoma. Lymphoma really does have a very characteristic appearance of just being a white nodule, a white mass. Okay, so anytime you see white mass that's kind of firm or looks firm, you can't really feel it, think lymphoma. Okay.
And this is stage 4, right?
This could have originated here. So stage, and again, the staging varies by the tumor. Like maybe it just goes up to stage 3. But if this was originating in the spleen and then it was here, then yes, because you got distant metastasis and if everything else kind of fell in line. And the staging system. So when you have like a stage that's like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. It takes all of those T and M factors into play to determine which stage it is. So I'm not sure exactly what it would be for this, but anytime you have distant metastasis, that's usually the culminating, like, this is not great. So probably, if you're going on that scheme. But this probably originated here. In cattle, they have some predilection sites of where lymphoma develops, but it can develop anywhere. One of those sites is the heart, and I actually have a slide somewhere. The heart, the uterus is another, the abomasum. Those are like your 3 common sites other than the lymph nodes. And I have a slide of that in a minute. Okay, so this is a lymphoma. So what organ is this?
Bovine kidney.
Yep. And so here you have lots of elevated whites, and there's some red and pink in there from the normal renal parenchyma, but overall they're white elevated masses, so this is lymphoma of the kidney. If this was a cat that had elevated white nodules, that was not lymphoma, what could it be? So I already said inflammation can look white. Pus can look yellow to white. Granulomatous inflammation can look white. So what, and I'll tell you in a cat with granulomatous inflammation, what disease is that? FIP. Yeah. So feline infectious peritonitis is characterized by pyogranulomatous inflammation, which is going to be centered on vessels because histologically it's actually a vasculitis and it's kind of spread everywhere. But cows don't get that, so the top differential would be lymphoma. So this is a case I had. So this is obviously a huge heart. So here's your heart, your lungs, your trachea coming down. And then you have this, like huge mass at the base of the heart, right? So I was thinking it was a chemodectoma, but it wasn't. It was a lymphoma. And when you open it up, so what is, and this was rotten, that's why it looks green and brown and black. But, so what is this structure right here? So here you have your, and we're going to go into a lot of heart stuff. So I know you may not be well versed in it right this second, but here you have your heart, the ventricle is cut open. So here's your myocardium, your valves. What are these structures coming down? Chordae tendineae. What are they attached to? Capillary muscles. And what is this? Aortic valve. Great. So this is the aorta. And you can tell that by these holes coming out, which is where all the little aortic branches come off. So this is the mass. It's actually surrounding the aorta. But it's not infiltrating the aorta at all. It's just like from the tunica media on out. So this was a cool case. So if this is the aorta and this is the aortic valve, where are we? Left ventricle. So that was what we saw there. This is your abomasum. Here's your duodenum kind of coming up. And you had this huge, like, hemorrhagic something. It was a, actually like a perforating ulcer with hemorrhage. A big blood clot. On the surface, the wall itself, I don't think I have any other pictures of that. The wall itself was very, very thick. And this is actually infiltrating the wall of the abomasum. So you have diffuse sheets of neoplastic round cells with scant cytoplasm and a high nuclear to cytoplasmic ratio and dark nucleus, like textbook lymphoma. Okay, these are what lymphocytes look like. And a higher magnification. What cell is that?
Which cell?
This one. Y'all see the arrow? Okay, here, y'all see the arrow in the middle now?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm gonna follow it down.
Plasma cell?
Plasma cell, yay. And so I didn't know what type of, so when you have lymphoma, it's usually not easy to tell whether it's T or B cell. Sometimes B cells will be larger, but not always. Most of the time T cells are smaller, but not always. So like looking at this, I would have thought it was T cell, but the fact that it's a bovine, what virus causes lymphoma in bovine? Bovine leukemia virus, if it had it, which I don't know if it did or not. And the type of lymphoma associated with bovine leukemia virus is B cell lymphoma. So for that reason, B cell was my top differential. But otherwise, like they look more like T cells. But we did do immunohistochemistry, and it was B cell lymphoma. So it may or may not have been associated with bovine leukemia virus. We didn't test for that. But of course, anytime you talk about bovine lymphoma, you have to talk about bovine leukemia virus, and that is erythrovirus. And we talked about the predilection sites of lymphoma, heart, abomasum, and uterus, and always lymph nodes. Even though I didn't list lymph nodes, that's just kind of understood and a given. Lymphoma affects lymph nodes. Okay. Here are some common immunohistochemical markers for lymphocytes. T cell lymphocytes, the most common marker or immunohistochemical saying is CD3E. Usually you just say CD3. You don't usually put the E on the end. So that's T cell. For B cell, you have several. CD79 or CD79A is pretty common. You also have CD20 and PAX5. CD stands for, does anybody know? I don't know if y'all talked about that. CD stands for cell differentiation. Excuse me. And they're called receptors. They're markers or little structures on the cells, and so they develop the antibodies against the cell differentiation markers to figure out how to identify cells. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. Next, we're going to talk about ovine pulmonary adenocarcinoma, which we already talked about. So what is the etiology? Who remembers? Please raise your hand. Even if you can't say it, you can kind of remember. Nobody? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Very good. So I had it written. So that's how you spell it. You pronounce it Yaxia. Who says it? Yaxia. I never. Yeah, that's how you remember. Yaxia. Yeah. Who's from Russia? Oh, you're a native. I'm sorry. I was like, is this a Russian word? Okay.
Dr. Nashar said it was Afrikaans.
Huh?
Dr. Nashar said it was Afrikaans.
What's that?
The language?
So that is an African language.
Afrikaans is a language. He
In
said that
Africa?
it's likely Afrikaans.
Okay.
That's Dutch.
What's your name? Mandora? Yeah. Mandrona. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. So yes, Yaxi virus may be of Afrikaans origin.
It is.
It is for
Googled
sure.
it.
It is?
It is.
Okay, it has been confirmed. It's a, what type of virus? Retrovirus. And, yeah, this is pretty, so they say this looks like fish flesh. So it has a fish flesh appearance, and it kind of does look like fish flesh. And the top differential for this is actually a virus, which can look similar, and that's the maybe virus, which I'm sure y'all have learned about. And what type of virus is that? It is a retro, but yes, so small ruminant lentivirus. So what is the other small ruminant lentivirus? Yeah, there's two you think about. Caprine.
So, if the adenovirus pertains to a gland, then why is it in the lungs?
So, grossly, those two look similar, but histologically, this is a tumor, the other is inflammation.
I have a question.
So here's an example. What type of tumor do you think this is? What is this form? Is it?
So, weird question. If adeno means pertaining to a gland, then why is it on the lungs?
So what do these look like?
They do, yeah, they do look like glands, I guess. So,
Yep.
okay.
So, one, it looks like glands.
Right.
And technically, your bronchi and bronchioles aren't called glands, but they are lined by cuboidal epithelium, which glands are. They do have some glandular components, like your Clara cells kind of secrete stuff. You do also have glands around your bronchioles. You actually have bronchiolar glands. So I think more so though, because usually these tumors are derived from they're usually bronchiolo-alveolar carcinomas. But maybe because they look like glands, but really they're not. And I never really thought about that before.
Yeah. When I think of alveolar, I think of squamous cells.
Yeah, yeah. So your alveoli are lined by a very, very, very thin cell. But when you have hyperplasia, like type 2 pneumocytes, those actually look just like glandular epithelium. So maybe it has less to do with the function than the appearance.
Okay.
Because really it's not glands. And that's such a good question. I'm so happy you asked that.
Thank you.
And you could just say bronchiolo-alveolar carcinoma, which is probably more correct. But because they look glandular, that may be why you'll see adenocarcinoma.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so here, this is not normal. Okay. Yeah, so this does not look like normal lung. Y'all know what normal lung looks like, right? All right. So this, you have these glandular appearing structures composed of cuboidal, I think I have a diagram. Yeah. Cuboidal to columnar epithelial cells, and they're forming multiple glandular structures. Okay, so that's what neoplasms do. They constantly divide and form similar structures over and over again. So this is a neoplasm, not inflammation, which you would expect to see with the native Eastern virus. All right. So this was another one we mentioned in sheep. So here's your nasal cavity. And then you have this structure, which is composed of like kind of turbinate bones, and it's right next to your brain. So what structure is this? Your ethmoid turbinate, so this is an ethmoid tumor. Okay, so this, as we mentioned before, is also caused by a retrovirus. It's antigenically distinct from Yaxi virus, though they are related. And this is called enzootic nasal tumor virus. It's a common name for it. And it causes enzootic intranasal tumor or endemic ethmoid tumor. This is a more appropriate name because it's not really in the nasal cavity. It's in the ethmoid region. All right, so just histology of an example. With this, here you have bone, right? But then you have these neoplastic population all over and higher magnification. All right, any questions on that? I think we're coming in soon. So this is an old picture, but you have the kidney here, and then you have this mass here, underneath the liver. So what structure do you think this is? The adrenal gland. Okay. So you can have cortical tumors of the adrenal gland or medullary tumors of the adrenal gland. So what is the medullary tumor of the adrenal gland called? And this is what that's an example of. And where else can you have pheochromocytomas? What other organ? The pituitary gland. Very good.
So that's what that was, a pheochromocytoma.
And if it was in the cortex, it would just be a cortical adenoma. Cortical adenocarcinoma. So the medulla of the adrenal produces what? What specific names? Someone said serotonin. Serotonin is a catecholamine, but it's just not produced by the adrenal medulla. So that's very good to be aware that it's a catecholamine. Dopamine, I think, is also a catecholamine. Okay, so we know epinephrine and norepinephrine, what it does. So you expect to see clinical signs associated with that if it's functional, meaning producing its product. So it can be associated with tachycardia, arrhythmias, and cardiac hypertrophy.